wonderful, exciting program for you today. Okay, I'm wondering if we need to turn this up. Is it the volume of this okay?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, good, thanks. Anyway, I just want to take a couple minutes before we move into our exciting program. We want to welcome 3 new members today. We're getting new members all the time, but today 3 at once. We're really happy. Welcome Peter Wendell. Thank you, Peter. Yep, thanks for waving. And we have Diana. Diana's right over here. Thank you, Diana. Welcome. And Eric Nelson. Eric. Welcome.
Same last name as me.
Well, we have somebody over here who shares your last name. I'm not sure whether she declared that because she wants to become closer, but there is that connection. Ladies and gentlemen, we find a lot of people connected in this room.
I don't know yet.
Well, all right, but she's open. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, today we have the editor of the Oregonian, Mr. Mark Katches. He'll be able to present a little bit, and then I know that you guys will be after him with questions. I'll allow Mark to give you a little bit of his own background. So without any further comments, ladies and gentlemen, Mark Katches, editor of the Oregonian.
Thank you for that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. I am not a prepared speech type of guy. My eyesight is declining, and I've lost my place one too many times trying to follow a script. So that comes with some pluses and minuses. The plus is that you're not going to get the scripted Marco Rubio type loop. The negative is I have no idea where we're going to end up. I've got my talking points, and it's only a page, but I could probably talk all day about the things that are here. I'll try to keep it to 15 or 20 minutes and then have plenty of time for questions. One of the members said to me when I got here, he first checked to make sure I didn't have a bulletproof vest on and wondered why I didn't. I've spoken at other events and I've been asked, boy, you're sure brave for showing up. And you know, usually when I come to these gatherings, I always come with a sense of optimism and look forward to these kinds of conversations. And then all of a sudden I get real nervous when somebody says, are you wearing a bulletproof vest? So fortunately I got my 2 bodyguards up here in front. Scott Nelson is our business editor. Al Bretman is one of our reporters. They're big guys and I think they could handle any crowd control. The first talking point I've got is change. Change is a constant, and change is a constant in the media environment. We are experiencing fast-moving, disruptive change in the media industry. And you all see it, you all recognize it. I've been in this business now for 31 years, and since there wasn't a bio, I'll just give you a few talking points, or a few points about me. I was at the Orange County Register for 10 years, came here after I was in Milwaukee, at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was the editorial director of the Center for Investigative Reporting for 5 years. For most of the last 15 years, I've actually been building investigative reporting teams. And I've had an opportunity to work on some pretty good stories along the way. But I've always dreamed of a job like this, and I've always dreamed of running a newsroom, and it's amazing to be able to work with the journalists that we have at the Oregonian and Oregon Live, a talented group of people, and we'll talk more about what we do. But as I said, change is an inevitable part of the media landscape today. And some of that change has been very, very jarring for our readers. The reduction of circulation days was jarring. The change from a full-size broadsheet newspaper to a compact size was jarring. seeing names that you had grown accustomed to in the newspaper leave, whether it was through a buyout or a layoff or to pursue other interests, is jarring. A lot of this is jarring. Recently, you may have seen or heard that we stopped running the New York Times editorial columnists. To some folks, that's jarring. There's some things about change, though, in the journalism climate that are actually, and I'll talk more about that New York Times thing in a minute, but there's some things about the media climate that is causing change that are actually positives. And I think you have to harness those positives. There was a time when the Oregonian had about 400 people on their staff, delivered the newspaper to 400,000 readers every day. Had international bureaus, people in Washington, D.C. But there was also something about the newsroom then, at least I've heard from folks who were there, and I can tell you from experience from being in other places that were large in the late 90s and early parts of the last decade, was that you can get fat and happy. And when you've got 400 people on your staff, you can get a little complacent. You can be a little arrogant. And I think, and I can't speak for the Oregonian because again, I wasn't here, but having been in the media industry now for 31 years, I can tell you that is it's a standard across the country. And one of the things about being lean and scrappy is it really prompts you and forces you to build relationships with your readers. You have to listen to your readers. You have to care about your readers. You have to engage with your readers. You really must have a relationship with your readers. And I spend every day when I drive home from work calling readers back who've called me during the day. One of the benefits of being a lean and scrappy organization is I don't have a bunch of layers between you and me. I answer my own phone. I respond to everybody who writes me an email unless they're a total jackass. But I do get emails all the time from people who are seeking explanations for how we do things, and I think it's rude, frankly, if I don't respond. So, I saw a nod back when I mentioned the New York Times columnist. For me, that was a choice between cutting more local staff, local reporting staff, or maintaining a wire service. And we talked about change a minute ago. Let me drill home that point. There was a time 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago maybe, where readers read the Oregonian for national and international news in addition to local news. That it was a full flavor operation. And some folks still do, and we still publish national and international news in our newspaper. But we have to also be realistic about how news consumption habits have changed dramatically. Most of our readers do not come to us for national and international news. They go to the New York Times online, or they read the New York Times in print. They go to the Wall Street Journal online, or they read the Wall Street Journal in print. If they want national and international news, they can go to Politico, the Washington Post, all these other websites where you can get great content. So what allows us to differentiate who we are from other media? And for us, it's about local journalism, local and regional news, and watchdog reporting, and doing that in our backyard, and being a key source of investigative journalism, watchdog journalism, explanatory and enterprise journalism, and breaking news in our own backyard. So it was really easy decision for us to say, we're going to cut the New York Times wire service and make sure that we maintain more of our own local reporting on the ground in Portland. I had a reader who reached out to me recently and said, now I have to read David Brooks in the New York Times. And I go, well, but you subscribe, right? She goes, yeah, I get it every day. I go, well, why do you then want to read it in the Oregonian? She was playing right into the whole argument of, I'm going to take the resources that we have and devote it to local and regional news that nobody else is going to cover. So now, as we talk a little bit about change doesn't have to equal or equate a demise. And I think it's important to also recognize, and this is something that none of you may know, is that we actually reach a larger audience today than we ever have by a long shot, okay? When the Oregonian was at its heyday with the 375, 400 people in the newsroom and reaching several hundred thousand daily subscribers, the website Oregon Live was in its infancy. The website Oregon Live was actually considered kind of an afterthought. Wasn't really tended by the staff at the Oregonian. And there was a very small group of people who actually worked for Oregon Live. Well, today, now let's look at where we're at. Last month, we had 75 million page views on Oregon Live, 14 million unique visitors. Now, put that into perspective, right? 300,000, 400,000 subscribers versus 14 million unique visitors. And 75 million page views is just quite extraordinary. We are, besides the LA Times and the San Francisco Chronicle, the largest web presence in the entire Western United States. We have a bigger web presence than the Denver Post. We have a bigger web presence than the Seattle Times. We have a bigger web presence than the Arizona Republic. You can go on and all the way down through California and into New Mexico. You have to go into Texas to find another news organization that has a bigger reach and a bigger digital footprint. So there's actually some amazing things that are happening in our newsroom. Last month, again, almost 76 million page views. Why? Does anybody know? Why do you think we had that much traffic?
Marijuana.
Harney County. Marijuana does drive traffic, but it was Harney County. Harney County accounted for more than 16 million page views last month. And here's something else that's amazing about the content that we produced. People saw us and clearly saw us as the go-to source for information about what was happening there. Les Zeitz, really sort of a secret weapon of ours, had produced 2 setup pieces about the dispute that was festering in Harney County that led to the occupation in late December, before anybody had even arrived to storm the refuge. So we were ahead of that story. We've broken that story. We set up the story, and throughout that story, we had broken more news and had more sustained enterprise throughout the entire coverage of it. And people saw us as a go-to source for information, so they kept coming back for more and more and more. And we ended up, our stories, here's a phenomenal statistic. Our stories on Oregon Live last month, on Harney County alone, were shared by people who sent them to friends, posted them on their Facebook page, tweeted out or retweeted a story more than 750,000 times. Over 250,000, actually I take that back, it was nearly 250,000 people commented on our stories on Oregon Live. So there was an amazing amount of engagement. You take away Harney County last month, and we still have a website that's producing 60 to 65 million page views every single month. So our web traffic is growing dramatically, and our audience reach is really, really extensive. People have asked, okay, well now, as an online news organization, are you all about clicks? Are you all about trying to get cute cat pictures on your website to increase your audience? And the honest to God truth is that we do want to grow our audience, but having an impact in our community is critical. My history and my background is in investigative journalism. That is why I got into this business. I've got into this business to change laws and make a difference. One of the stories I'm most proud of, I've had an opportunity to work on 3 stories that have won Pulitzer Prizes. But the story that I'm most proud of never won a single award. But I was able to find, in a course of 2 or 3 weeks, when I was at the Orange County Register. Did I lose you?
Yeah.
Can you switch to the other mic? Well, we could I got a loud enough voice where I can.
Yeah, we've got older folks in the back, and they hear worse than me. Bring it up.
Is that working? Yep. Can you hear me? Is that good? Sorry about that. But I spent 3 weeks in 1998 working on an investigative story in which I found a church that had been operating in Orange County. And it turned out that it was located in a house, little tract home in Huntington Beach. It was the first church of life, had no phone number, no services. It was based in the home of this one man who was a member of the church and a founder of the church. Turned out he was the only member of the church, and he had started 7 charities, all based in this house. And one was for domestic violence victims, and one was for veterans, and one was for firefighters, and one was for disabled children, one was for police. All great sounding charities, and he was raising millions of dollars in the name of charity and could account for only $1,000 ever actually going to help a single soul. And I found out about that story, and I wrote about that story, and I blew the lid off of this charity operation in this one-man church. And those series of stories that I did resulted in 4 people going to prison for 15 years. You know, that is why we do what we do. Telling stories that matter, telling stories that make a difference. And if you look at what we do at the Oregonian, we are as committed to that as ever before. And when you talk about change, some things stay the same. We actually have as many people today in our newsroom devoted and dedicated to the pursuit of investigative reporting than we had when the Oregonian won a public service Pulitzer in 2000. They had a 5-person investigative team back then. We have 5 people on our investigative team today. And we've had stories over the last 6-9 months, you've probably seen some of them, that have taken a year to do. When Lynn Terry wrote her story about salmonella poisoning, I hope you're not eating chicken. But when she wrote her story about salmonella poisoning and the USDA's failure to contain outbreak after outbreak after outbreak after outbreak over the last 15 years, coming from Foster Farms chicken, nobody had told that story. It took a year for Lynn Terry to tell that story. It took a year, and Lynn Terry wasn't doing a lot of other stories in that time because we wanted her to stay focused on telling that story because it was incredibly important. And that story, which was honored as a finalist for an Online News Association award, you may have remembered it. It was on the front page of the Oregonian last May, or April, was named for its innovative investigative reporting. But it took a year to tell that story. So we are still there. We are still working hard to tell stories that matter, and even if it takes a year, or 6 months, or 9 months, or whatever it might be. You know, before we started writing stories almost about a year ago about the homeless crisis in Portland, very little was being done about it. There are 15,000 people in Portland who sleep on the streets at night, don't have a home, can't afford a place to live. And up until the time we started an 8-part series called Our Homeless Crisis, there was very little that was being done. In fact, a lot of leaders in Portland had basically said, you know, there's not much we can do. But we brought awareness to a problem that has now sparked a whole new debate about homelessness, not just in Portland, but throughout the whole Portland region, and in Washington County, and in Clackamas County, and throughout Multnomah County. So there's now legislation on the agenda of lawmakers to make change. There are concrete steps that are occurring at Multnomah County to prompt change. The mayor of Portland cited our work in his State of the City address, and both mayors who are running, the major mayors for mayor, candidates for mayor in Portland, have stressed that dealing with the homeless issue will be an important part of their platform moving forward. We did a series of stories last year about developers who were tearing down homes that had asbestos in it, or doing major remodeling that had asbestos. And asbestos, is, when it gets airborne, can be a major carcinogen, can cause all kinds of lung disease. And the state had one of the laxest rules in terms of dealing with asbestos removal. And our series has brought great awareness to this problem and has already led to some policy changes. So there's things like that are happening with a regular basis in our newsroom. We still have the largest newsroom in the state of Oregon. And with the number of resources we have, our newsroom is about 130 people today. It's much smaller than it used to be. But again, we're scrappy, we're resilient, and we're realizing we have to move at a different pace to make things happen in our community. But we still have the kinds of resources we know that can make a difference. When I first got here, and I've told a few folks this in our newsroom, if another news organization started up, just popped up with 130 people, and even if they only published and home delivered a few days a week because they picked the days where it was going to have the highest impact for advertisers and for readers, we'd all be cowering under the table. That would be a major threat to us, but that is us. That is who we are. We are still the primary source for local and regional news. No one can compete with us. We are going to be here for a long time to come. We've got the hurdles ahead. There's no doubt about that. No one in this industry, not in New York, not in Texas, not in Florida, not in Wisconsin, not in California, has figured out the exact model to make newsrooms sustainable into the future. We're working very hard to try to figure that out. But until we do, you can count on one thing. We are going to be there looking out for you and looking out for the interests of our community by covering the stories that matter. So with that, I will take any questions that you guys might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katches. And I see people are lining up already. Just as a reminder, people would like to ask questions of the speaker. You need to be a paid-up member of the forum. And I mean, we just got some new members today, but I have an executive director accessible to me who is always happy to take money from even more. Besides, today is a record, like 3 members in one day on an event. That's fantastic. And I'm sure there's somebody here who is not a member who wants to help us break that record. Now that I've said all that, we've got people lined up here. I will get out of the way, and here's our first questioner. Thanks again, Mr.
Mike Mahalik, forum member. Thank you for coming today. It was my wish when Eric Lukens was here a couple weeks ago that someone would tell us how the news comes together each day. But before I say that, I agree with you on your, I'll call it consolidation. I'm a 30-year subscriber of the Journal and New York Times and 40 years for the Oregonian. And we do have to have newspapers to tell us what's going on because we can't figure out everything. So my question is, tell us how the news comes together every day.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for it. It's also not easy to answer because it's different every day. That's one of the things I've always loved about this business is that you come to work every day and it's never the same. It really isn't. But some things do happen on a schedule. We are largely staffed in our newsroom from 5 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. We are posting news all day long on Oregon Live. We've got reporters who cover a variety of beats and topic areas. And one of the things that when I first got here, we had actually stopped covering certain things. We didn't have anybody really covering agriculture and farming and natural resources. We'd actually reduced the number of people who were covering health and other beats like that. And one of the interesting dynamics about newsrooms that have changed a lot over the last many years is that when they have had to make cutbacks and they've had to make some sacrifices, what they've tended to do is get rid of things like investigative reporters, and what they've tended to do is get rid of topical beats. Like you may have read, I wrote about this recently, we have somebody who covers faith and values, which isn't necessarily purely a religion beat at all. It really is a focus on spirituality and ethics and morals and other issues, and religion certainly is part of that beat. But we didn't have anybody doing that either. And what happened is, and this was not sort of just a inherent problem in Portland, is that when newspapers started to make cuts, they started to reduce those enterprise beats and stay focused on their core. And their core was city hall coverage, maybe education coverage, cops and courts coverage, okay? And that became really, part of the problem there is, although those are all important beats, is then you become so driven by an institutional agenda, and you're driven by incremental change, and your focus is on every little thing that happens at a planning commission meeting or at a school board meeting or at a city council meeting. And the honest to God truth is that although some people devour that information, not everybody is obsessed with it, okay? So we started losing a lot of the types of beats that I think people would find made us interesting. So faith and values makes us interesting. Diversity and change is a beat that makes us interesting. Covering farming and agriculture, the second largest economy in the entire state, is essential, and yet we had stopped really doing that. We didn't have anybody covering retail and shopping until about 1.5 years ago. So we've made some changes to our beat structure to have people covering beats that where they're out there mining for news and finding good stories to tell. But back to the original question, so from 5 o'clock till 11, we're working. We have a full staff of reporters. We have 90 reporters and editors still to this day. Reporters, editors, producers, photographers at the Oregonian and at Oregon Live. And they are looking for great stories to tell on a daily basis. And some days they're going to produce more than one story. Other days they may not produce any, but they're gathering up the string to tell a great Sunday story, or a story that might need, as I said, an investigative story could take 6 months or a year. It's an interesting thing. We also have the benefit of something that we didn't have when I was starting in this business. When I was starting in this business, you went with your gut all day long. You made decisions based on your instincts and what you thought people would care about, what you thought people would want to read. And one of the great benefits we have today is we have the access to metrics that are real time, that are letting us know what are the stories that people are interested in. Some of that will then determine how we present news in the Oregonian the next day, because we are a digital first operation. Everything we publish, I think maybe 1 or 2 exceptions in the last 1.5 years that I've been here, publishes on Oregon Live first, okay? And then we have a team of people who work in the evening taking the best work that we publish during the day and fashioning a newspaper. And we will produce probably anywhere from 150 to 200 stories a day on Oregon Live. The internet is infinite, right? You've got infinite space. You could write long, you could write as much as you want. In a newspaper, you're hamstrung by size and news hole and the shape of around the advertising, right? So we put in print maybe 40 or 50 stories a day. Most of them are staff written and staff generated, but we do put obviously some stories from the Associated Press and other wire services. But it's almost a 24/7 operation. It's not quite 24/7, but I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay.
Peter Wendell. Speaking of Oregon, or the Oregon Live, is the design of Oregon Live foisted on you by your parent company? Do you like the design of Oregon Live? And if you compare Oregon Live
My
to
bodyguards.
newspaper online sites, to me, it doesn't really feel very user-friendly.
Yeah.
So.
You know, great question. Thank you for asking. I would say the one other good thing that's great about web design is that it's iterative, right? And it's changing. I don't know if you looked at our site a year ago, we had that god-awful beige color palette that just felt so like out of place in Portland. We had a whole different set of fonts that we were using. We've changed how we curate stories on the homepage of the website. So there have actually been some subtle and not so subtle changes to the way Oregon Live presents itself on for readers, okay? It is part of largely a templated design that all the advanced news organizations do use. But there are some areas, obviously we can have some flexibility with what we put on the homepage and how we position things, and even the way the modules on the page are designed. We have some flexibility, because it's not, if you go to every one of our websites, you will see a common look, but you do have some flexibility. Would I like to have more flexibility? I don't think anybody would tell you that they wouldn't want to have more flexibility, right? Is it a terrible website? I don't think it's as good as, say, some others, like the New York Times is one that we all probably appreciate and think is so reader-friendly and easy to navigate. At the same time, it's hard to argue with the audience numbers, because it keeps just propelling and growing every month. We grew our web audience 35% year over year last year, and a high majority of our readers, our unique visitors every month, are coming back. And they're coming back, more of them are coming back the next month, and more of them are coming back the month after. Now, if we had a different design, would even more of them come back, and would more of them stay, and would more of them engage on our site? Yeah, you could probably argue that that might be the case. But it's also hard, again, to argue with 250,000 comments in a month on just one set of stories, or shared stories 750,000 times last year just on one set of stories. And one of the things we also introduced in the last couple months were new share buttons that have made it far more easy for people to share information. Did I get most of those questions, or was there one I missed?
Well, I guess, how much influence do you have on this template?
Yeah.
And why, like some newspapers, I can go and actually see a facsimile
Yeah.
of the paper. We have flip
Yeah.
pages, in the paper. Yeah, you have that, but.
We do have that. A lot of people don't know that, though, and I think, honestly, we could probably do better at marketing that. But we have the replica version that we publish every single day. And then the other thing is this. It's a different audience, okay? Here's something that you, most people here, I was surprised to learn, frankly. You wouldn't know this probably. The amount of overlap on our Oregon Live and the Oregonian is like 25%. Yeah. So the 40% of our online audience, 40% and growing, one of the highest numbers in the entire country, are millennials. Okay? We have a huge amount of millennials reading Oregon Live. We had some folks in from Linfield College recently, and the way I described it is, the audience of Oregon Live are all you. They were like 20 years old, 21, 22 years old, young. And the audience of the Oregonian are your grandparents. And it's kind of true. And there isn't that many, there's a far more thin Venn diagram intersection of Oregonian and Oregon Live readers than I thought when I would have gotten here. So, you know, and you know what? I get millennials who don't like the way it looks either, right? But at the same time, they keep coming back and they keep coming back. So it could be worse, right? Hi.
Hi, Patrick Wheeler, forum member. Old friend of mine who's published for the LA Times said that people have no control over what happens in Washington, no control of what happens in Salem. They have some control about where the stop sign is for their child across the street. And that thought is always stuck with me. And then you recently got rid of the Washington County Bureau and eliminated 6 writers.
Yeah.
And you talked about getting regional input.
Yeah.
I think there's a disconnect here.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. We didn't get rid of the Bureau. We still have the Bureau out there, and we still have a couple people who are working out there. It's smaller than it was. But look, here's the thing. You can't go from a 400-person staff to a 130-person staff without deciding that there are certain things you just can't do the way you once, or the way you wished you could, okay? I wish I could have 20 people covering Washington County. I wish I could have 20 more in Clackamas County, right? I wish I could have 20 people in Salem, and I wish I could have 20 in Washington, D.C., right? I wish I could. But you know, the fact of the matter is, because people stopped reading the paper as much as they used to, and because people stopped advertising the way that they did with the regularity that they once did, I can't sustain it. Can't sustain it. And the fact of the matter is, we have, you know, another thing in terms of as a manager, I don't want to be in a position where, I mean, when people say this, I want to clock them, but do more with less. You know, I think that it's a failed management principle and strategy to do more with less. Because if you do more with less, what happens? You run people into the ground. They bail on you. They go find other jobs. They don't want to work for you anymore. The morale gets even worse and worse, right? So I believe the only way you can do this is you got to do the right things with the right amount of resources, right? I got a great reporter in Washington County. He's sitting right here, okay? I've got an outstanding new columnist, Samantha Swindler, who many of you probably know, who's writing 2 times a week and is bringing voice to many of the stories in Washington County that frankly we weren't telling at all before. And you know, I got a lot of people in the newsroom downtown who have lived here and have worked here. Casey Parks was in the West Bureau, Laura Frazier, Anna Merrim, Luke Hamill. Luke Hamill covers real estate and development, right? He knows this county. He covered Hillsborough, so he knows this. He knows the terrain. And I expect all of our reporters who are covering regional beats to bring that sensibility to covering beats that have broad appeal to Washington County, Clackamas County, Multnomah County. So just because you may see fewer people covering a city hall doesn't mean that we don't have folks who are covering issues that intersect with our region and with this county. Now, would I like to have more? Absolutely. Again, you know, I've gotta make decisions, and they're not easy ones, but it's the one that I felt we had to make to be able to protect our core. And we can talk more about this afterwards.
Jim Cape, former member. Question about the career strategy of journalism students who they work for a local newspaper for a few years and then become PR for a local government. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, well, okay. It's a hard question to answer, right? Because you're all everyone's driven by their own motivations, right? I've had opportunities to go work in PR, and I can't think of a job I'd want to do less, right? Even if it paid me more money, right? This is what I love to do. This is what I'm passionate about doing. Being a journalist is all I've ever wanted to be. I think what we've got in our newsroom today are people who are passionate about this. They've withstood a lot of change. They've withstood a lot of disruption, and they're still there. They're there because they love what they do. And, you know, look, it's also, I'm under no illusion, we're not gonna lock people up for lifetime contracts. It's America. You can go wherever you want. You're an unrestricted free agent when you work in journalism. So you can get a job any day, any place, right? So people are gonna come and go. When people do leave, I have to look for opportunities to bring in new skill sets, new perspectives, new thinking, to try to like bolster what we have in our newsroom and add to a diverse mix of what we have in our newsroom to make the kind of work that we do more interesting and compelling to our readers, right? But you know, the fact of the matter is, some of those jobs that you mentioned do pay more money. And if you're motivated by pay, you're not gonna stick around working in a newspaper or in any newsroom. You just aren't. But if you're motivated by making a difference, if you're motivated by telling stories, if you're motivated by getting to the heart of matters and helping people understand issues in their communities, it's still a great gig. The people that are in journalism school today, God bless them, right? I mean, the thing about it is that for journalism students today, they're easier pickings for us to hire good journalism students because you know their heart is in it. They see it as a calling, right? This is what they want to do. And despite all the things that are happening, and they've seen all the major changes, they see that there are tens of thousands fewer people in America today working as journalists as there was 5 or 10 years ago. And yet they still want to do this. That gives me some hope that the people that we're bringing in as interns this summer and the people that we're looking for opportunities to hire, people who really want to do this, they see it as this is their calling, this is what they want to do. But you know, you can't compete with government jobs, a nice pension program, right? If that's what motivates you.
Hi, my name is Sora Dubitsky, and I'm a foreign member, and I have to say that you look much younger than your picture in the paper. You do.
But the hair.
No, it wasn't hair, forehead, you look younger. So aside from that, several points. That was my first point. Second point, I do have a subscription to the Oregonian, as well as the New York Times. And every time I write out my check to renew my subscription for 8 weeks, I question why I'm doing that. Because when I get the paper delivered 4 times a day and I can read it online and the PDF is really good, you know, in case anybody hasn't. But when I get the paper, it's like 12 pages of sports, maybe the same amount in news, a lot of flyers, and take out the flyers, take out the sports, there's nothing there.
Yeah, that's the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday papers.
Wednesday, Friday.
Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday are a lot
Very.
thicker. You picked up yesterday's paper,
okay,
right?
thicker,
Yesterday's
but
paper
not
was huge.
thick.
Yeah.
Thicker, but not thick.
Okay.
Okay. So that's the second point. The third point is Washington County. I'm a Washington County political activist in my own way. I publish a newsletter for Washington County Democrats. And what does it take to get coverage of those kinds of events, especially now since you have cut reporting in Washington County?
Yeah. Okay, so.
Thank you.
Okay, do you want me to answer The first two?
Please, well, not the one about you look younger.
I am.
Then there were the second two.
I appreciate the compliment. I turn 53
It's
next week.
sincere.
Thanks.
Sincere. When as soon as I walked in, I said, wow, you look younger. That was my first one. You look younger than your picture.
These new batteries. I'm so sorry. Okay. 53. Spot my skin.
Sure. So, yeah, why continue subscribing?
Why continue
and-
subscribing? Okay, let me answer that question.
Especially since Oregon Live is free.
Yeah, no, I get it. We have a lot of readers who ask that question. But again, there's two things. There's very little overlap of the readership, so it doesn't, I don't let
Yeah, I'm
that
a geezer.
bother. But you're reading the site. Here's the thing. If you go to our site, I mean, does anybody here read Twitter? Does anybody have a Twitter account? Okay. You go into your Twitter feed, and things move really fast. They call it the river. It's a stream, and then sometimes it moves so fast that you miss things. You miss a lot. Our site is not that different because we're publishing so much content there. It's easy to miss stuff. What's beautiful about the newspaper is it's carefully curated to package news that we think is going to matter to the people who do read it, okay? And we are packaging it for an older audience. I'm not going to kid you about that. Well, the problem is this. Here's the problem. Let me tell you the problem. You don't want sports. You don't want a certain comic. If I cut that certain comic, you're mad. If I cut sports, you're happy. He's mad, right? So the problem is I got to try to. This is the challenge of the general interest site. You've got to have enough general interest news and sports and information that's going to appeal to your audience. And I don't expect you to read the thing cover to cover, okay? I expect you, and I don't know if you're all like this or if you're more like me. I figure if I get 5 or 6 great stories that I'm going to spend my time with and read and learn something that are going to help me, and I'm not suggesting that there are only going to be 5 or 6 stories in the paper. But I'm looking for that. I'm looking for things that are going to make me feel like I know more and I'm more empowered now about certain issues that are local and regional, right? And I can have intelligent conversations with my friends about it, right? And I want you to find 5 or 6 stories like that every single day. And I want you to, and you, and you, and you, and you. And that adds up to the what we can produce, because I know that we're not going to be able to generate a product in print that is going to appeal to everybody. Not every single thing will appeal to everybody. So I think what we do is curate, and again, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yesterday's paper was phenomenal, okay? I thought we had a great paper. We had an amazing investigation on the front page. We had terrific aftermath coverage of Harney County. We had a good, solid story, an analysis that looked at the property tax, the disparity in property taxes that people are paying. And I thought there was a lot of energy in some of our other coverage as well. Look, the fact of the matter is, we're always going to be, with the size that we are, the biggest and best source of local and regional news. I mean, Willamette Week, as good as it is, they do great work. They got 4 reporters. I got 90. So I've got people here who can be tuned in to the kinds of stories that we want people to tell.
The community papers, the pamphlet papers,
Right.
they're starting to deliver at home.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to put in.
God bless them. Let them do what they do, okay? I can't compete with the hyper-local, minute, micro types of stories that they want to cover. I just can't, nor do I really want to, honestly. Again, I got to create a general interest website and newspaper that is going to appeal to all of as many readers as we possibly can muster. And, honestly, I mean, that's my best argument to you. But you have, the third question was
Oh, it's
which?
just about cutting Washington County, but
Yeah,
they're waiting
well-
online, they're waiting for it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we can talk more after. Yeah. Hi.
Hated Brad.
Yes.
Chris Leslie, forum member. The Oregonian had 12 points they were going to watch for the legislation this year from Salem, so it's regional. And one was transparency, especially Kate Brown said she was going to eliminate or aid transparency. How's that going?
Well, first of all, you're referencing the Oregonian editorial boards, things that they're watching, which, so just so you know, we are totally separate from them. Yeah, they operate, and Eric Lukens was here last month and I think talked to you about how they operate, but they set their own agenda. There's a 4-person editorial board that sets their agenda, writes their editorials. We do not intersect at all with them. That was their whole agenda. In terms of transparency, I could say there's a jury. I will answer that. The jury is out. I mean, there have been a lot of instances where Kate Brown has talked about transparency, and yet we haven't quite seen it fully delivered. But, you know, she's still new in her job. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
John McWilliams, forum member, and thank you. My question really was going to be about the competition between paper journal and I think you answered that. So thank you very much for doing that. My question now is about comics. Are you also over comics, or is that a different person?
No, I am over comics.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So who makes
Sometimes I think that's all I'm over.
Yeah. So who makes the decisions on all the changes, and are you
Light me up.
Okay.
What don't you like?
Well, I'm not too excited about losing some and getting some, but anyway, it's,
Right.
So
Well,
anyway,
we can have a, we can have a
Sometimes-
specific
sometimes
conversation
we'll
about
do
this
that.
afterwards, but,
Sure.
but, you know, give me one example.
well, I'm not too into unicorns.
Oh,
So,
so yeah. All right, so here's let's talk about that for a second. By the way, what do you guys think of 6 chicks? Down? Down? Okay, I see a couple thumbs down. I actually have not gotten a lot of negative feedback about 6 Chicks. Now, I would say 6 Chicks has probably had a couple of strips that were, you know, not the greatest, but by and large, I actually find it kind of funny. But with 6 Chicks actually replaced Doonesbury reruns, right? So we brought in 6 Chicks because Doonesbury, a couple years ago, stopped doing daily comic strips. He only does fresh strips. Gary Trudeau only does fresh strips on Sunday, and we didn't want to be in the business of running reruns 6 days a week. So we said, with Peanuts being the one exception. Peanuts has obviously been in reruns for many, many years, and that you don't mess with Peanuts, right? We did a comic survey recently. Did you get a chance to fill that out? Did you participate?
You know, I don't know if I have done that before.
Yeah.
However, Doonesbury local, and I don't see anything wrong with repeats.
Yeah.
Personal.
Okay.
Personal
Well,
opinion.
right.
So anyway, thank
There
you.
was
Other people have questions here.
There was a
Okay,
lot
so
of people who really were tired of Doonesbury repeats. It wasn't like made in a vacuum. There were a lot of people who answered the survey, didn't want to see it anymore. They were tired of the small print. They were tired of the old sort of dated strips. And we were looking for some and again, but here I'll get back to this. We run 29 strips in the paper every day. We run 36 on Sunday. I don't expect you to love them all. You know, you got your favorites. I know you do. We'll go for one more minute here. You got your favorites, and read your favorites and enjoy them, right? Share them with your friends. But the ones that you don't like Phoebe and her Unicorn, which is really geared towards younger kids, which, you know, we got to try to get some younger kids like in the strips too. You know, that was sort of how we were thinking there. And Stone Soup is another one that we lost, which was a great comic, but the author decided that she was going to stop doing strips except for Sunday.
Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Yeah. Sure.
Appreciate being here.
Okay, I'm Tim Hutchinson. I'm a forum member.
Just to switch gears a little bit, you've been talking about the impact of expenses and overheads to the newspaper. You haven't really mentioned anything about revenue, and my understanding is one of the biggest hits to newspapers was basically loss of classified advertising. And but when I look at the paper today, and I look, I'm not so sure exactly how the advertising online, whether you get that all or whatever, but I don't really see any attempt to try to recapture losses that you get, like from I guess Craigslist is the one, and I just was interested about whether you've given that too much thought, and actually what are the revenue streams and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, classified revenue was like, it was absolutely, think about it. It was 30 pages a day, 40 pages in some markets of money just rolling in, right? For a little 3-line advertising that we charged a decent amount. It was, people got good value out of it. But the fact of the matter is that when it became free, how do you compete with free, right? Oh, good, you do? Well, you can tell me later. Because no one has figured out how to compete with free when it comes to classified advertising. So that is a huge chunk of revenue that the Oregonian and every newspaper in America has lost, and lost probably for good, unless you've got some magic solution. And so you got to deal with the fact that you do have a different, you've got all these competitive, I mean, even it wasn't just classified, like people who wanted to sell their sofa, but it was employment advertising. That now every company has their own site to do employment advertising, right? So if you're at Intel, if you want to work at Intel, you're not going to look for an ad in the paper necessarily. You're going to go to the Intel website and scan their available jobs, just like most every other employer will handle it. So we've lost that. We've lost a great amount of revenue, frankly, over the last many years. That's why you see smaller and smaller staffs, because we have to try to make our budget, and we have to try to be sustainable.
Do you get the revenue from the ads on your page, on your website?
Oh yeah, and our advertising revenue, digital advertising revenue, went up well over 30% last year. It's growing, but we needed to grow faster for us to be in a point where we can feel like we've finally gotten over that big hump.
Virginia Bruce, forum member, publisher of the Cedar Mill News.
Hi.
Hi. I'd like to ask you if you understand, unique is a very overused word, but do you understand what makes Washington County government very unique in the U.S.?
Why don't you help tell me? Because,
okay.
Listen, I've only been here for a year and a half, and there's still a lot I need to learn about the entire state of Oregon.
If all the people who live in urban, unincorporated Washington County were one city, it would be the 3rd largest city in Oregon.
Right.
You guys decided to drop the category of north of 26 from Oregon Live, and that represents a huge portion of urban, unincorporated citizens in Washington County. You keep referring to city council. Well, an awful lot of us aren't governed by a city council.
Right.
I would really like to see you guys consider this and beef up your coverage of Washington County Commission, governance, and the issues that affect us in urban, unincorporated Washington County.
Right. So what I would say is that if you've got great story ideas, or you think there are big issues that are
I put them in my paper.
Well, okay, that's great. But others who live in the community, if you've got ideas of things that you think we ought to be covering, talk to Al and talk to Samantha Swindler, or send them to me. Let me finish now.
Okay.
Okay, you can talk some more. But let me just finish. I'm on a roll here. But bring the information to us, and then we will do what we can to cover them in a way that we see.
I used to do that with Dana Timms.
Yeah.
you were
Dana's
telling
doing that
this lady
topless right now.
that you would like to have her find storage that she enjoys.
Yeah.
Bring back north of 26. Don't just give us the Hillsborough Argus. I don't really care very much about what's going on in Hillsborough.
Right. Okay, thank you.
We're done?
We are done. Thank you for being on a roll and bringing that roll with you. Really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Mark.
Happy to stick around and answer other questions you have.
Sure. So Mark will be around if there's any individual questions. Just let me bug you for another 2 minutes or so, and I'm only going to bug you to tell you some really great things that are happening. Next week, we have Annette Evans from Washington County. She'll be discussing homelessness in our county. There'll probably be a reporter to cover that. Honestly, Virginia, there probably will be. Following that, the following week, we have Jake Uyghur from Oregon Alliance for Gun Safety, talking about one point of view on the Second Amendment, and yes, there'll be another point of view expressed later on. And then on March 7th, we have Ben Unger from our Oregon talking about the corporate tax increase potential. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your questions, for your time, and for those of you that haven't got a membership before you leave here, it's one of the absolute best deals in town. And he's waving, he knows. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. See you next Monday.